Welcome to Midnight Affairs, where secrets unravel, desires ignite, and bold stories keep you on the edge. Tonight begins Chapter 1, our very first story where passion meets betrayal in the most gripping way. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. The grandfather clock in the corner of the living room struck midnight, its chime echoing through the silent house. Nathan, a 42-year-old former Marine, sat at the kitchen table, absently turning a coffee mug in his hands. The day had been long, but his instincts, those razor-sharp senses honed over years in the field, kept him alert. Something wasn't right. From the hallway, he heard the faint, hurried tapping of fingers on a phone screen. His wife, Clara, stood in the dim light spilling from their bedroom, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. Her back was turned to him, her shoulders tense. She bit her lip, hesitating before pressing send. A soft ding followed, signaling a reply that seemed to make her flinch. Nathan's eyes narrowed. Clara rarely texted late at night, and when she did, it was never with this level of secrecy. She glanced over her shoulder, quickly tucking the phone under her pillow. Her movements were rushed, almost guilty. Clara noticed him standing in the shadows and forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice strained. "Something like that," Nathan replied, his gaze unwavering. "Who were you texting?" "Oh, just my sister," Clara said too quickly, brushing past him with an air of nonchalance. She didn't wait for a response as she disappeared into the bathroom, leaving the faint scent of her perfume behind. Nathan's attention was drawn to the bed. The faint corner of a folded piece of paper stuck out from under her pillow. Quietly, he reached over and pulled it free. It was a receipt from a high-end restaurant he'd never been to, dated 2 nights ago, the same night she'd claimed to be at a book club meeting. His chest tightened. This was no ordinary lie. His gut told him there was more beneath the surface. Nathan clenched the receipt in his fist, his mind already racing to piece together the truth. Have you ever noticed small actions that made you question someone's loyalty? Let us know in the comments. Nathan leaned back against the kitchen counter, staring at the crumpled receipt in his hand. It wasn't just the piece of paper that unsettled him, it was what it symbolized, the cracks forming in a foundation he once thought unshakable. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, but inside Nathan's head, memories collided like waves in a storm. His mind wandered back to the beginning, to the moments when he and Clara had been inseparable. 15 years ago he had returned to San Diego after his first deployment, a changed man. The heat of the desert and the weight of responsibility had left their marks on him. He'd been numb, hardened, and unsure of how to reconnect with the world outside the military. Then he met Clara. She was working as a nurse at the Veterans Hospital where Nathan had gone for a routine checkup. Her warm smile had been the first thing to crack through his armor. There was something in her eyes, a mix of kindness and strength, that made him feel seen for the first time in years. It started with small conversations, her asking about his injuries, him joking about military food. But those exchanges quickly grew into something deeper. Clara had a way of making him laugh, of pulling him out of his guarded shell. He could still hear her laughter from those early days, carefree and infectious. It had become his lifeline, the sound that reminded him he was more than just a soldier. Their love was fast and intense. Within a year they were married in a small ceremony on the beach. Nathan could still picture Clara walking down the aisle, barefoot in the sand, her white dress billowing in the ocean breeze. The setting sun had bathed her in a golden light, and he'd thought to himself that she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. She wasn't just his wife, she was his partner, his safe harbor in a world that often felt chaotic and unforgiving. For years they were unstoppable. Clara stood by him through grueling training schedules and long deployments. She sent care packages filled with handwritten letters and little tokens of home that kept him grounded even in the darkest moments. And when Nathan was home, he made sure to be present. He planned date nights, surprised her with flowers, and made her laugh until tears streamed down her face. They were a team and their love felt unbreakable. When their son Aiden was born, everything seemed perfect. Nathan remembered holding Aiden for the first time, swearing to himself that he would be the kind of father his son could always rely on. Aiden became their world, a symbol of their love and shared dreams. Nathan found joy in the little things, teaching Aiden how to ride a bike, reading bedtime stories, and cheering him on at soccer games. But somewhere along the way the perfect picture began to blur. Nathan couldn't pinpoint exactly when it started. Maybe it was after his final deployment, when he came home not just with physical scars but emotional ones as well. The weight of what he'd seen and done overseas lingered, and although Clara tried to help, he could sense her growing frustration. Clara changed too. Her laughter, once so spontaneous, became forced. She started working late shifts more often, coming home exhausted and distant. Nathan chalked it up to the stress of life, raising a child, managing a household, balancing careers. But then there were moments he couldn't ignore. He noticed the way she'd tense up when her phone buzzed late at night or how she'd pull away from his touch with excuses about being tired. Small things at first, a missed dinner here, a vague explanation there. But over time they piled up, creating a gap between them that Nathan didn't know how to bridge. And now this receipt. It wasn't just the date or the name of the restaurant that gnawed at him, it was the betrayal it represented. Clara had told him she was at a book club that night, sharing wine and laughter with her friends. But the receipt told a different story, a dinner for two at a place Nathan had never even heard of. He clenched his jaw, his frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He had faced enemies on the battlefield with unwavering courage, but this was different. This was his home, his family, the life he had fought so hard to build. And now it felt like it was slipping through his fingers. But Nathan wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily. If Clara was lying to him, if she was betraying not just him but their son, then he needed to know. The truth might hurt, but it was better than living in the shadow of doubt. Setting the receipt down on the counter, Nathan made a silent vow. He wasn't the kind of man who backed down from a fight, and he wasn't about to start now. Clara might have her secrets, but Nathan had his strength. He would uncover the truth no matter how painful it might be. Enjoying this story? Don't forget to subscribe for more bold and dramatic tales. Nathan's heart was pounding as he sat in the living room, staring at Clara's phone lying on the coffee table. She had left it there after rushing out to drop Aiden at soccer practice. It wasn't like her to forget her phone. Clara was always attached to it. The temptation gnawed at him, each passing second building the urge to uncover what she was hiding. His fingers hovered over the screen. Nathan wasn't the kind of man to snoop, but the receipt and Clara's recent behavior had left him with no choice. He unlocked the phone with ease. Clara's password hadn't changed since the day they set it up. His stomach churned as he opened her messages. Most were innocuous conversations with friends and colleagues, but then his eyes landed on a thread labeled only with a single heart emoji. He hesitated for a moment, then tapped it. The messages hit him like a gut punch. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I wish I could see you again tonight, but Nathan's around. Soon, baby. We just need to be careful. The words blurred as anger and disbelief coursed through him. He scrolled further, each message more damning than the last. There were pictures too, nothing explicit but intimate enough to confirm what he feared. The man's name was Alex, someone Nathan had never heard Clara mention before. Nathan set the phone down, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. His hands trembled, not with fear but with controlled fury. The betrayal wasn't just an attack on him, it was an affront to their family, to everything they had built together. Before he could process the full weight of what he'd found, Aiden's voice broke the silence. Dad. Nathan turned to see his son standing in the doorway, clutching a soccer ball. Aiden's innocent eyes darted between Nathan and the phone on the table. What's up, buddy? Nathan asked, forcing calm into his voice. Why is Mom always on her phone now? Aiden asked, his tone curious but tinged with confusion. Even during my games she's texting. She never used to do that. Nathan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He knelt down to Aiden's level, placing a hand on his shoulder. Mom's been busy with work and other things, he said carefully. But I promise we're going to figure things out. Okay? Aiden nodded, though his expression remained puzzled. Okay. Can we practice some shots now? Of course, buddy. Go get set up outside. I'll be right there, Nathan replied, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. As Aiden disappeared toward the backyard, Nathan's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about protecting his son from the fallout of Clara's betrayal. He returned to the phone, taking pictures of the incriminating messages with his own device. If he was going to confront Clara, he needed undeniable proof. But a confrontation wasn't enough. Nathan was a strategist by nature, and he knew he had to think carefully before making his move. The betrayal ran deeper than he had imagined, but Nathan wasn't about to let it destroy him or his son. He would investigate further, uncover every lie, and make Clara answer for what she had done. This wasn't just about trust anymore, it was about justice. With one final glance at the phone, Nathan locked it and placed it back on the table. His next steps were clear: gather evidence, protect Aiden, and prepare for the storm that was about to unfold. This battle wasn't over, but Nathan was ready. This gripping story is just getting started. Don't forget to subscribe for more bold and dramatic tales. Nathan heard the familiar sound of Clara's car pulling into the driveway. He braced himself, his jaw set and his heart pounding with controlled fury. The images and messages he had uncovered were fresh in his mind, each one a dagger piercing deeper into the life they had built together. As Clara walked into the house, she seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside Nathan. She greeted him with a casual smile, setting her purse on the counter. "Aiden's all set for practice. Coach said he's really improving." Nathan didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood in the doorway of the living room, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on her. "We need to talk, Clara," he said, his voice low and steady, but laced with an edge that made her freeze. Clara turned to him, her smile faltering. "What's wrong?" Nathan didn't mince words. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone and tapping on the screen. A moment later, the incriminating messages were in front of her. He held it out, his eyes locked on hers. "Who's Alex?" Her face paled as she glanced at the screen, then back at Nathan. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Don't lie to me, Clara," Nathan said, his voice rising. "I saw the messages. I know what you've been doing." Clara's eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape. "Nathan, it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" he interrupted, his tone sharp and cutting. "You've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me, and you expect me to believe it's not what it looks like?" Clara's defensive walls shot up. "You're overreacting. Alex is just a friend from work. We've been talking about a project." "Stop it." Nathan's voice thundered, silencing her. He stepped closer, his presence towering over her. "Don't insult my intelligence, Clara. Friends from work don't text each other about how incredible last night was, or talk about sneaking around when I'm not home." Clara's face twisted into a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I don't have to explain myself to you, Nathan. You're always suspicious, always assuming the worst. Maybe if you spent less time trying to control everything and more time being here for me, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Nathan's fists clenched at his sides. Her words stung, but they didn't shake his resolve. "Don't try to turn this on me. I've been here, Clara. I've been here for you, for Aiden, for this family. And while I've been holding everything together, you've been tearing it apart." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but Nathan saw through them. He knew her tactics, the way she deflected, twisted the narrative to make herself the victim. "I never meant for things to get this far," she said, her voice trembling. "It was just, I felt alone, Nathan. You've been so distant since you came back, so focused on your own struggles. I didn't know how to reach you." Nathan's anger flared again. "So your solution was to betray me? To betray our son? Don't you dare use my struggles as an excuse for your choices. You had every chance to talk to me, to work through this together, but instead you chose to lie." Clara looked away, her tears spilling over. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry, Nathan. I don't want to lose this family." Nathan's voice was like steel. "You should have thought about that before you threw it all away." He stepped back, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't over, Clara. Not by a long shot. You've broken my trust, and I won't let you manipulate me into forgetting that." Clara reached out as if to touch him, but Nathan stepped back further, his expression cold. Her excuses only solidified his resolve. This wasn't over. Clara adjusted the strap of her dress as she stepped into the dimly lit nightclub, the sharp click of her heels announcing her arrival. The air was thick with the mingling scents of expensive perfume and spilled liquor, a heady mix that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the bass-heavy music. Her heart raced, not with guilt, but with a dangerous thrill of anticipation. The vibrant energy of the club enveloped her, drowning out the nagging voice in the back of her mind. Her eyes scanned the crowd, finally settling on Alex, leaning casually against the bar. His tailored shirt hugged his athletic frame, and his confident smirk radiated charm. He raised a glass in her direction, the glint in his eye making her pulse quicken. Clara's pace quickened too, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she wove her way through the throngs of laughing patrons. "Hey beautiful," Alex murmured as she reached him, his voice smooth as silk. He pulled her into an embrace, his touch lingering in a way that made her forget the world outside the club's walls. Clara melted into him, her hands finding their place on his chest. "I missed you," she whispered, her words barely audible above the thrum of the music. Alex tilted her chin up, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't a chaste kiss, it was bold, possessive, and left no room for second thoughts. His hand slid to her waist, drawing her closer, and for a moment, Clara let herself get lost in the illicit heat of the moment. When they finally broke apart, Alex grabbed a bottle of champagne from the bar and led her to their usual booth in the back of the club. The dim lighting and heavy shadows offered a sense of privacy, but it was an illusion. They were hiding in plain sight, and that only added to the thrill. Alex poured 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to Clara as he leaned back, his eyes locked onto hers. "You look stunning tonight," he said, his voice low and smooth, a perfect match for the seductive atmosphere. Clara laughed softly, a nervous edge to her voice. "You always know what to say," she replied, sipping the champagne to steady herself. "It's not just words," Alex said, reaching across the table to brush his fingers against hers. "You deserve this, Clara. You deserve to feel alive. To be with someone who truly appreciates you." His words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, soothing the parts of her that felt unseen and unwanted at home. Nathan's distant stares and cold silences replayed in her mind, a stark contrast to the way Alex made her feel. She sighed, her gaze dropping to the table. "It's just so complicated," she admitted. "Nathan suspects something, I can feel it. He's not the kind of man to let things slide." Alex leaned forward, his tone turning serious. "He doesn't have to know. You're smart, Clara. Careful. We'll make this work." Clara hesitated, the weight of her double life pressing down on her chest. The risk was enormous, but so was the pull of what Alex offered. A sense of freedom, of passion, of escape from the monotony her life had become. "What about us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This can't just be stolen moments forever." "It won't be," Alex promised, his hand sliding up her arm in a way that made her shiver. "You deserve more than that. More than him. And I'll make sure you get it." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with Nathan's name. Her stomach dropped, and she grabbed the phone quickly, silencing it before Alex could see the full name. "Everything okay?" Alex asked, his brow furrowing slightly. "It's fine," Clara lied, her voice shaky as she shoved the phone back into her purse. "He's probably just checking in." Alex reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You need to stop worrying about him. Tonight is about us." Clara nodded, forcing a smile as she pushed her doubts aside. Alex was right. Tonight was theirs. She couldn't let the outside world intrude, not when she finally felt alive again. As the night wore on, they laughed, shared drinks, and lost themselves in each other's company. Alex had a way of making her feel seen, like she was the only woman in the room. But as intoxicating as the evening was, a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her that this couldn't last. Before they parted ways, Alex leaned in close, his lips grazing her ear. "Tomorrow night. Same place, same time," he murmured, his voice a promise that sent a shiver through her. Clara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "I'll be there," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. They kissed one last time before Clara slipped out of the nightclub, her heart pounding as the cool night air hit her skin. For a brief moment she felt invincible, as though she could keep both worlds from colliding. But what she didn't know was that Nathan, her ever-watchful husband, had already begun piecing the puzzle together. And soon, her carefully constructed facade would come crashing down. Would you confront your partner directly or gather more proof first? Share your thoughts below. Nathan parked his truck a block away from the nightclub, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The address had been unmistakable, pulled straight from the damning messages he had uncovered just hours earlier. Clara thought she had been careful, but tonight she had underestimated him. The pattern was there, her lies unraveling with every step, and Nathan wasn't about to let this moment slip away. The dim streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement as Nathan slouched in his seat, keeping an eye on the entrance. Minutes felt like hours until he finally saw her car pull up. Clara stepped out, her figure illuminated briefly by the headlights as she adjusted the hem of her sleek black dress. She looked stunning, more so than he had seen in years, but the sight only twisted the knife deeper in his chest. This wasn't for him. It was for someone else. Nathan's jaw clenched as Clara walked toward the club entrance with a confidence that stung. She didn't glance back, didn't hesitate. She wasn't sneaking. She wasn't ashamed. He waited a few beats after she disappeared inside before stepping out of his truck, pulling his baseball cap low over his face. He wasn't here to confront her, not yet. This was about evidence. Proof. Something that would expose her deceit for what it was. The nightclub was alive with pounding bass and flashing lights that painted the walls in neon streaks. Nathan slipped inside unnoticed, sticking to the shadows, his military training kicking in as he scanned the crowded room. His gaze landed on Clara almost immediately, her figure unmistakable even in the chaos. She was at the bar, her back to him, laughing with someone, a man. Nathan's stomach dropped as he took in the scene. The man leaned casually against the bar, his tailored shirt stretched over a broad chest. His hand rested on Clara's lower back, possessive and familiar. Then it happened. Alex turned Clara toward him, pulling her into a kiss that wasn't subtle or fleeting. It was deep, confident, and brazen, as though the crowd around them didn't exist. Nathan's vision blurred with anger, his fists tightening at his sides. He wanted to storm over, to pull the man away from his wife and make him regret every second of that kiss. But he stopped himself. This wasn't the time for emotion. This was about strategy. Nathan slipped his phone from his pocket, steadying his hand as he focused the camera. He snapped several photos, each one a dagger to his heart but a necessity for what was to come. The evidence was damning, Clara's betrayal captured in vivid, undeniable detail. He watched as they moved to a secluded booth at the back of the club. Nathan followed, keeping a safe distance, pretending to check his phone as he positioned himself near enough to hear their conversation. "You don't have to keep looking over your shoulder," Alex said, his voice low but audible over the music. "Nathan's not going to find out." Clara hesitated, swirling her champagne. "You don't know him like I do. He's sharp, Alex. If he suspects anything, he won't stop until he finds the truth." Alex smirked, leaning closer to her. "Let him suspect. We've been careful. You deserve to be happy, Clara. Don't let him ruin this." Nathan's stomach turned as Alex reached across the table, taking Clara's hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingers intertwine with his, her lips curving into a soft smile. "What about us?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. "How long can we keep doing this?" "As long as we want," Alex replied confidently. "This doesn't have to end, Clara. You're not stuck. You can have a life where you're happy, where you're loved the way you deserve." Nathan bit down on the inside of his cheek, forcing himself to stay rooted. His anger was a fire threatening to consume him, but he knew better than to act now. He adjusted his phone and captured more photos, every angle telling a story of betrayal. Their conversation continued, drifting in and out of suggestive whispers and promises for the future. "So, tomorrow night?" Alex asked, his voice barely audible. "Same place, same time," Clara replied without hesitation, her tone tinged with excitement. Nathan had heard enough. He slipped out of the club unnoticed, the cold night air hitting him like a slap to the face. Leaning against his truck, he scrolled through the photos on his phone, each one more damning than the last. His chest heaved with suppressed rage, his mind a whirlwind of anger, pain, and determination. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a calculated, repeated betrayal, and Nathan wasn't going to let it continue. He climbed into his truck, gripping the wheel as a new resolve settled over him. He wasn't just a husband betrayed, he was a man preparing for justice. It was no longer about trust, it was about exposing the truth. Would you confront your partner directly or gather more proof first? Share your thoughts below. Nathan leaned against his truck, the cool metal pressing into his back as he gathered his thoughts. The evidence he had collected was damning, but it wasn't enough. Clara's betrayal wasn't just an emotional wound, it was an affront to everything he stood for. If he confronted her too soon, she might find a way to spin the narrative, twisting his fury into something irrational. He needed more. He needed the full picture. The following night, Nathan parked in the same spot a block from the nightclub. The street was quieter this time, the soft hum of distant traffic filling the cool night air. His pulse quickened as he spotted Clara's car pulling into the lot, her headlights briefly illuminating the dark facade of the building. She stepped out, dressed in a deep red dress that clung to her curves in a way that twisted Nathan's stomach. She paused to check her reflection in the side mirror, smoothing her hair with practiced precision before walking toward the club's entrance. Nathan's eyes followed her every step, his anger simmering beneath a carefully maintained mask of calm. This time he decided to stay outside, knowing he had captured enough of the nightclub rendezvous the previous night. He had a hunch they wouldn't stay there long. Clara and Alex's messages had been cryptic, hinting at a change in plans. Nathan shifted in his seat, his patience thinning as minutes turned into nearly an hour. Just as he was starting to doubt his instincts, the couple emerged from the club. Alex's arm was draped around Clara's waist, and they both laughed as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Nathan's stomach tightened, the sight of their intimacy igniting a fire he struggled to contain. They headed toward Alex's car parked a few spots down. Nathan slouched lower in his seat, watching as Alex opened the passenger door for Clara with a flourish. She slid inside, her legs visible for a brief moment as she adjusted her dress. Alex walked around to the driver's side, sliding into the car. Nathan didn't wait long before starting his engine, keeping his headlights off as he followed them at a safe distance. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, his heart pounding with every turn they made. The car weaved through quiet streets heading toward the outskirts of town. After 20 minutes they pulled into a dimly lit motel parking lot, the neon sign flickering ominously above the office door. Nathan parked in the shadows, watching as Alex and Clara stepped out of the car. Alex grabbed her hand, leading her toward one of the rooms. Nathan's breath caught as he raised his phone, snapping photos of their movements. The motel room door opened, and Alex gestured for Clara to enter first. She laughed, a sound that cut through Nathan like a blade before stepping inside. Alex followed, closing the door behind him. Nathan sat in his truck, the weight of what he'd witnessed pressing down on him. His mind raced, torn between storming into the room and maintaining his composure. He needed undeniable proof, something that couldn't be refuted or explained away. Just as he was deciding his next move, his phone buzzed in his pocket. The sudden sound made him flinch and he quickly silenced it, cursing under his breath. In the eerie stillness of the parking lot, the buzz seemed louder than it was and he glanced around nervously. A curtain moved. Nathan froze, his gaze snapping to the motel room window. A shadow appeared behind the thin fabric, hesitating for a moment before stepping back. His heart raced, wondering if Clara or Alex had heard the noise. He held his breath, his instincts screaming at him to retreat, but his determination kept him rooted in place. The shadow lingered near the window and Nathan's stomach tightened. Had they seen him? Would they confront him? He remained perfectly still, watching as the shadow finally moved away, disappearing deeper into the room. He exhaled slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the steering wheel. The near discovery rattled him, but it also steeled his resolve. This wasn't just about catching Clara in a lie, it was about exposing the depth of her betrayal. Nathan waited a few minutes longer, ensuring the coast was clear before slipping away into the night. His mind was already racing with plans. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Clara's excuses wouldn't save her now, and Alex wouldn't walk away unscathed. Nathan's path was clear. He would uncover every lie, every deceitful act, and when the time came, he would make sure there was nowhere for Clara to hide. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to decide between acting immediately or waiting for the perfect moment? Share your thoughts below. Nathan sat in the living room, the dim light casting long shadows on the walls as he reviewed the photos and recordings for what felt like the 100th time. Each image burned into his memory, Clara laughing with Alex, their intimate kiss, the motel door closing behind them. There was no room for misinterpretation, no shred of plausible denial left for Clara to hide behind. Tonight was the night he would confront her, and he would hold nothing back. The sound of Clara's car pulling into the driveway jolted Nathan from his thoughts. He closed his laptop and tucked his phone into his pocket, his mind sharpening with resolve. He rose to his feet, standing tall as the front door opened and Clara stepped inside, her face glowing from what she no doubt believed was another successful deception. "Nathan?" she called out, her voice tinged with surprise. Why are you still up? Nathan didn't respond immediately. He stepped into the light, his eyes locking onto hers. The weight of his silence made Clara falter, her confident stride halting as she took in his rigid posture and cold stare. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice softer now, guarded. Nathan crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. "I think you know exactly what's wrong." Clara blinked, confusion giving way to unease. She set her purse down, her fingers fidgeting with the strap. "I don't understand." "Don't lie to me, Clara," Nathan interrupted, his voice sharp, slicing through her feigned innocence. "I've seen everything. The messages. The photos. The motel. You and Alex." Clara froze, her face draining of color. For a moment she seemed to search for words, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Nathan, I can explain." "Explain?" Nathan's voice thundered, the anger he had held back for weeks finally boiling over. "Explain how you betrayed me? How you betrayed our son? How you threw away everything we built for a fling with some stranger?" Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but Nathan wasn't moved. He had seen this act before, the way she twisted the narrative to play the victim. "Not this time." "It wasn't like that," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Alex and he's just someone who listened, someone who—" "Don't," Nathan barked, his tone cutting her off mid-sentence. "Don't you dare justify this. You had a choice, Clara. You could have talked to me, worked through whatever was missing. But instead you chose lies, secrecy, and betrayal." Clara took a step back, her tears spilling over. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, Nathan. I never wanted—" "You didn't think about me or Aiden or what this would do to us." Nathan's voice cracked with fury. He stepped closer, his presence towering over her. "You only thought about yourself, about whatever thrill you got sneaking around with him." Clara shook her head, her tears falling freely now. "It wasn't just a thrill. I felt alive with him, Nathan. You've been so distant, so wrapped up in your own world. I didn't know how to reach you anymore." Nathan's laughter was cold, bitter. "So that's your excuse? I wasn't attentive enough, so you ran into someone else's arms? Do you even hear yourself?" Clara's lip quivered, her defenses crumbling under the weight of Nathan's anger. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I made a mistake. Please, Nathan. Don't destroy everything because of this." "Destroy everything?" Nathan repeated, his voice quieter but no less dangerous. "You already destroyed everything. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." He pulled out his phone, unlocking it and holding it up so she could see the photos, the messages, the undeniable proof. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she realized the depth of his preparation. "Everyone will know," Nathan said, his voice cold and resolute. "Your family, your friends, Aiden, everyone. You wanted to live this double life, Clara? Fine. But you're going to pay for it." Clara collapsed onto the couch, her sobs filling the room. "Please, Nathan," she begged, her voice broken. "Please don't do this. Don't ruin me." Nathan stared down at her, his expression unmoving. "You ruined yourself, Clara. This isn't just betrayal, it's war." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her to drown in the mess she had created. Upstairs, he stood outside Aiden's door, his heart aching as he listened to his son's soft snores. This battle wasn't just about justice, it was about protecting the only thing that still mattered. His son. Audience question. How would you handle betrayal this deep? Confront them immediately or let the truth unravel further? Share your thoughts below. Nathan sat at the heavy oak desk in his home office, the dim light of a single lamp casting shadows across his face. On the surface he was calm, methodical even, but beneath the exterior, a storm brewed. His military training had taught him one crucial lesson. Emotions are the enemy of precision. If he wanted justice, he needed a plan, one that would leave no room for Clara to maneuver or manipulate. The evidence he had collected was meticulously organized. Photos of her with Alex, screenshots of their incriminating messages, and even recordings of their conversations. Every detail had been documented, time-stamped, and backed up on multiple devices. Nathan wasn't just preparing for a confrontation. He was building a case that would dismantle Clara's world piece by piece. His first call was to a divorce attorney. He had researched the best in the area, a no-nonsense litigator known for ruthlessly protecting her client's interests. When the attorney answered, Nathan's voice was steady and firm. I need to file for divorce, he began, wasting no time. Infidelity, emotional neglect, and I have a child to protect. I have evidence, substantial evidence. The attorney listened carefully, her questions concise and professional. Nathan outlined the situation, detailing Clara's betrayal and his primary goal, ensuring full custody of Aiden. We'll move quickly, the attorney assured him. With the evidence you've provided, we'll make this airtight. I'll draft the necessary documents and you'll have them by the morning. Nathan hung up, his resolve hardening further. The divorce was only the first step. Clara had tried to destroy his life quietly, but he wouldn't allow her the luxury of slipping away unnoticed. He opened his laptop, pulling up a list of Clara's family, friends, and colleagues. With each name, he crafted a message, attaching the photos and evidence he had gathered. The messages weren't cruel, they were calculated. Simple, factual explanations of Clara's betrayal accompanied by proof. Nathan wasn't out to humiliate her unnecessarily, but he wasn't going to let her continue the charade either. As he typed, Aiden's face flashed in his mind. His son didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. Nathan's anger burned brighter at the thought of Clara's actions jeopardizing their son's stability and happiness. He closed his eyes for a moment, grounding himself. This wasn't just about vengeance, it was about securing Aiden's future. He reached for his phone and dialed his closest friend, Daniel, a fellow Marine and someone Nathan trusted implicitly. Dan, I need your help, Nathan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. What's going on? Daniel asked, his voice immediately serious. Nathan explained everything, sparing no detail. By the time he finished, Daniel was silent for a moment. Tell me what you need, Daniel finally said. I need backup. I want you to help me ensure she doesn't manipulate the narrative. I need you to talk to Aiden when the time comes. He'll need someone who isn't in the middle of this mess to help him understand. You've got it, Daniel replied without hesitation. Whatever you need, I'm there. Nathan ended the call, feeling a small measure of relief. He wasn't alone in this fight, and that knowledge fortified him. Finally, he turned his attention to Alex. The man had inserted himself into Nathan's life, tearing at its seams with casual arrogance. Nathan wouldn't confront him physically, he wasn't about to let emotion cloud his judgment. Instead, he crafted a message attaching the same evidence he had compiled for Clara. You think you've gotten away with this, Nathan typed, his words deliberate. But you'll learn soon enough what it means to cross me. Stay away from my family. This is your only warning. The message was sent, simple yet powerful. Nathan knew Alex would feel the weight of it, and that was enough for now. As the clock ticked past midnight, Nathan leaned back in his chair, staring at the neatly organized folders on his desk. Each one represented a step in his plan, a plan that would leave no stone unturned. He wasn't a man to be trifled with, and Clara was about to learn that in full. This wasn't just about ending their marriage, it was about reclaiming his life, his dignity, and ensuring his son was protected from the chaos Clara had brought into their world. Nathan rose, shutting off the lamp and plunging the room into darkness. The path ahead was clear and he was ready to see it through to the end. Dear audience, have you ever taken control of a difficult situation with careful planning? Share your experiences below. Nathan stepped into the large, brightly lit conference room with a calm that belied the storm raging inside him. The room buzzed with polite conversation, the hum of networking professionals filling the air. Alex's company was hosting a high-profile charity gala, a perfect stage for his polished image as a rising entrepreneur. Nathan couldn't think of a better place to confront him, publicly, boldly, and in a way that Alex would never forget. Dressed sharply in a tailored suit, Nathan moved through the crowd with purpose. He wasn't here to make a scene without reason. He was here to send a clear message. This wasn't just about personal vengeance, it was about showing Alex the consequences of crossing him. Nathan's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Alex. He stood near the stage, surrounded by a small group of admirers, his charm on full display. Clara's betrayal stung all over again as Nathan watched Alex laugh and gesture confidently, oblivious to what was about to happen. Nathan approached slowly, his presence commanding attention as he stepped into Alex's circle. The chatter quieted as those around them sensed the tension in the air. Alex turned, his smile faltering slightly as he recognized Nathan. Nathan, Alex greeted, attempting a casual tone. This is unexpected. Nathan's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm. "Alex, I thought it was time we had a conversation." The subtle menace in Nathan's tone drew the attention of everyone nearby. The air grew heavier, and Alex's attempt to maintain his composure began to crack. He glanced around nervously, clearly aware of the eyes now fixed on them. "I'm not sure what you mean," Alex said, forcing a tight smile. "But this might not be the place for—" Nathan cut him off. "This is exactly the place." He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "You think you can sneak around with another man's wife and walk away without consequences? You think you're untouchable?" Alex's confidence wavered, his hands fidgeting slightly as he tried to maintain his composure. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't insult me," Nathan snapped, his tone sharp enough to make those nearby flinch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, holding up a photo of Alex and Clara from outside the motel. "This ring any bells?" Alex's face turned pale as the image came into view. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Nathan took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You made a mistake, Alex. A big one. And now you're going to pay for it." Alex stammered, "Listen, I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" Nathan's voice rose, his anger palpable. "You didn't mean to pursue a married woman? To tear apart a family? Don't pretend you're innocent in this." The surrounding crowd grew larger, whispers spreading as more people stopped to watch. Alex shifted uncomfortably, his polished image unraveling before their eyes. Nathan leaned in, his tone icy. "You thought you could humiliate me in the shadows, but I'm dragging you into the light. Everyone here now knows exactly who you are. A coward who preys on what doesn't belong to him." Alex's face reddened, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to speak. "Nathan, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," Nathan replied coldly. "You crossed the line and you'll regret ever thinking you could get away with it. Stay out of my life. Stay away from my son. And stay far, far away from anything that belongs to me." Nathan straightened, his broad shoulders casting an imposing shadow over Alex. "Because the next time I see you, there won't be a warning." The room was silent now, the weight of Nathan's words hanging heavily in the air. Alex swallowed hard, visibly shaken as he avoided meeting Nathan's piercing gaze. He glanced nervously at the crowd, realizing his humiliation was complete. Nathan turned on his heel, his expression calm but resolute as he strode toward the exit. He didn't need to hear Alex's excuses or protests. The message had been delivered, and Nathan had no intention of lingering. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Nathan's chest heaved with a mix of satisfaction and fury. Alex's confidence had crumbled, but Nathan wasn't done. This wasn't just about a confrontation, it was about reclaiming his life and ensuring the world knew he wasn't a man to be trifled with. Inside the room, Alex stood frozen, his face pale, his reputation left in tatters. He had thought he could play his games without consequences. Now he knew better. Nathan adjusted his tie, glancing at the crowd gathering in the elegantly decorated banquet hall. The soft murmur of conversations filled the air as guests mingled beneath the glow of ornate chandeliers. This event, a charity dinner hosted by Clara's family, was the perfect stage for what Nathan had planned. Clara had no idea he'd be attending, nor that tonight would mark the crumbling of the false world she had built. In his hand, Nathan held a folder, a simple yet powerful weapon containing irrefutable proof of Clara's betrayal. Photos, messages, and screenshots were neatly compiled, ready to be unveiled. He wasn't here for petty revenge. He was here to reclaim his dignity and protect his son. Clara had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences in front of the people she had fooled for so long. Across the room, Clara stood near her parents, dressed impeccably in a navy gown that shimmered under the lights. She was the picture of composure, laughing lightly at a comment her mother made, blissfully unaware of Nathan's presence. Nathan moved through the crowd with purpose, stopping briefly to greet a few familiar faces. Every step brought him closer to the moment of reckoning. When he reached the stage, the MC was wrapping up an introduction for the evening's speakers. Nathan stepped forward, his calm demeanor drawing the attention of the room. He picked up the microphone, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his tone measured yet commanding. "Before tonight's event continues, I'd like to say a few words." The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward him. Clara's smile froze, her confusion evident as she whispered something to her mother. Nathan scanned the room, his gaze finally settling on Clara. Many of you know me as Clara's husband. For years I've stood by her side, believing in the life we were building together. But sometimes reality has a way of shattering the illusions we cling to. Clara's face paled as her eyes widened in realization. She took a step forward as if to stop him, but Nathan held up a hand. Not yet, Clara. You'll have your turn to explain, if there's anything left to say. He opened the folder, pulling out a photo of Clara and Alex in an intimate embrace. Holding it up for all to see, he continued, for those who don't know, this is Alex, Clara's partner, though not in any way I was ever informed about. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Clara's father looked horrified, her mother's hand flying to her mouth in shock. Nathan didn't stop. He held up a series of messages next, reading aloud one of the most damning exchanges. Last night was incredible. I can't wait to see you again. Words exchanged while I was home with our son, trusting the woman I thought I knew. Clara stepped forward again, her voice trembling. Nathan, please. Stop this. No, Clara, he interrupted, his voice rising with conviction. You don't get to control the narrative anymore. For years I've been a devoted husband, a father, a provider. I fought for this family, for you, for Aiden. And while I was doing that, you were tearing it apart behind my back. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Clara tried to stammer a response, but Nathan didn't give her the chance. You betrayed me, he said, his voice cold and unwavering. You betrayed Aiden. And you betrayed everyone in this room who believed in the person you pretended to be. At the mention of their son, the crowd's reaction shifted from shock to anger. Clara's parents looked at her with disbelief, and her father's face turned red with fury. Nathan's gaze softened slightly as he turned toward the corner of the room, where Aiden stood with Daniel, his closest friend. The boy's face was a mix of confusion and sadness, but Nathan knew this moment was necessary. He met Aiden's eyes, his voice firm yet gentle. Son, I want you to know this isn't your fault. None of this is. You deserve honesty, and that's why I'm doing this. Aiden nodded slowly, his small hands gripping Daniel's arm for support. The weight of the moment hung heavily on the boy, but Nathan could see the spark of understanding in his eyes. Clara broke down, her hands shaking as she pleaded, Nathan, please? Don't do this here. We can fix this. Fix this? Nathan repeated, his voice filled with bitter disbelief. There's no fixing what you've done, Clara. This isn't just a mistake, it's a choice you made again and again. And now you'll live with the consequences. The weight of Nathan's words sank into the room, leaving Clara visibly shaken. Her parents turned their backs on her, their disappointment etched deeply into their faces. Friends and colleagues whispered among themselves, their once friendly gazes now filled with judgment. Nathan stepped down from the stage, handing the folder to Clara's father as he passed. You deserve to see the truth too, he said simply. As he approached Aiden, he knelt down, placing a steady hand on his son's shoulder. Let's go, buddy, he said softly. Together, they walked out of the hall, leaving Clara behind to face the wreckage of her carefully constructed world. This wasn't just about exposing her infidelity, it was about reclaiming his dignity and showing Aiden that strength wasn't in hiding pain but in standing up for what was right. Audience question. Do you believe public exposure is the right way to handle betrayal? What would you do? Share your thoughts below. Nathan stood in the center of the living room, the weight of the last few days pressing heavily on his shoulders. Across from him, Clara sat on the edge of the couch, her head in her hands. The woman who once held his trust, his heart, now looked small, broken under the weight of her own choices. But Nathan felt no sympathy. He had given her every chance to be honest, every opportunity to fix what was broken. She had chosen betrayal, and tonight he would choose closure. The room was eerily silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Nathan's voice broke the quiet, cold and steady. Do you have anything to say before I speak? Or are you going to keep hiding behind excuses? Clara looked up, her face streaked with tears. Nathan, I've apologized. I've told you I made a mistake. I never meant for this to happen. A mistake? Nathan interrupted, his tone laced with disbelief. He took a step closer, his gaze piercing. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is misplacing your keys. What you did wasn't a mistake, Clara. It was a series of deliberate choices. Choices you made while I was here, trying to hold this family together. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but Nathan raised a hand to silence her. No. You don't get to talk your way out of this. Not anymore. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folder, tossing it onto the coffee table in front of her. The papers spilled out, copies of text messages, photos of her and Alex, receipts from their rendezvous. The damning evidence lay bare between them, a tangible representation of her lies. You see this? Nathan said, his voice rising. This is everything you tried to hide. Every lie you told. Every moment you thought you could deceive me. It's all here. Clara's eyes widened as she looked at the folder, her hands trembling. Nathan, please? I'll do anything to fix this. We can go to counseling. We can? There is no we, Nathan cut in sharply. You destroyed that the moment you decided Alex was worth more than your family. You didn't just betray me, Clara. You betrayed Aiden. You tore apart the foundation of this home, and for what? For a man who won't even stand by you now that the truth is out. Clara's sobs filled the room, but Nathan's resolve didn't waver. He leaned closer, his voice cold and unyielding. You lost everything because of your choices. I'm done, Clara. I'm done fighting for someone who gave up on me long before I ever suspected. Clara reached for his hand, desperation etched on her face. Nathan, please? I still love you. Nathan stepped back, her touch repelling him like poison. Love. Don't you dare use that word with me. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't destroy. Whatever you felt, it wasn't love. He turned toward the stairs, his voice steady as he spoke. I've already filed for divorce. The papers will arrive in a few days. I'll be fighting for full custody of Aiden, and I will win. You won't take him down with you, Clara? Her sobs grew louder, but Nathan didn't turn around. He had made his decision, and there was no going back. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, glancing over his shoulder one last time. This isn't the end for me, it's the beginning, he said, his voice filled with finality. Goodbye, Clara. With that, he ascended the stairs, leaving her to sit alone in the ruins of her decisions. Upstairs, he peeked into Aiden's room. His son was fast asleep, his face peaceful and unburdened by the chaos unfolding downstairs. Nathan stepped inside, brushing a hand gently over Aiden's hair. For the first time in weeks, Nathan felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't just walking away from Clara. He was walking toward a future where he and Aiden could rebuild, free from the lies and deceit that had poisoned their home. The past was done. The fight was over. And now it was time to begin again. So my dear audience, how would you move forward after betrayal? What would your first step be? Share your thoughts below. The morning sunlight streamed through the curtains of Nathan's new apartment, its warmth touching every corner of the modest but comfortable space. The echoes of the old life he left behind were faint now, replaced by a cautious optimism for the future. For the first time in months he felt a sense of peace. Today wasn't about looking back, it was about building something better for him and Aiden. Nathan stood in the kitchen, frying eggs while Aiden sat at the small dining table, sketching in a notebook. It was a quiet moment, simple yet profound. They had lost so much, but Nathan was determined to show his son that even in the aftermath of betrayal, life could move forward. Dad, Aiden said, his voice breaking the silence. Are we going to see Mom today? Nathan hesitated, his hand pausing over the pan. Aiden's question was innocent, yet it carried the weight of a young boy trying to make sense of the fractured world around him. Nathan turned, meeting his son's curious gaze. Not today, buddy, Nathan replied gently, setting the spatula down. Mom needs some time to figure things out. But we'll see her when the time is right. Aiden nodded slowly, his pencil tapping against the table. Do you think she's sad? Nathan's chest tightened, but he forced a small smile. She might be, but we're going to be okay. You and me, we've got each other. That's what matters. Aiden's lips curved into a faint smile, and he returned to his drawing. Nathan turned back to the stove, his mind replaying the chaos of the last few weeks. Clara's betrayal had torn through their lives like a storm, but in its wake, Nathan had found a clarity he hadn't realized he needed. He thought about the nights he had spent agonizing over what went wrong, questioning his worth and drowning in anger. Those emotions still lingered, but they no longer defined him. He wasn't just a man betrayed, he was a father, a protector, and someone determined to show his son what resilience looked like. After breakfast, Nathan took Aiden to the park, the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of fallen leaves. As Aiden ran ahead to the playground, Nathan sat on a nearby bench, watching his son climb the monkey bars. For the first time in months, Aiden's laughter filled the air, free and unburdened. It was a sound Nathan hadn't realized how much he had missed. A familiar voice pulled Nathan from his thoughts. "Nathan?" He turned to see Daniel approaching, his old friend and unwavering ally during the darkest days. Daniel sat beside him, handing Nathan a coffee. "How are you holding up?" Nathan shrugged, taking a sip. "Better than I thought I'd be. It's not easy, but I've got Aiden. That's what keeps me going." Daniel nodded, watching Aiden as he played. "You've handled this better than most would. You didn't let her destroy you?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "I couldn't afford to. Not for me, not for him. Clara made her choices and now I have to make mine. I'm not wasting another second on anger or regret. I'm moving forward." Daniel smiled, clapping a hand on Nathan's shoulder. "That's the Nathan I know." As the afternoon sun began to dip, Nathan and Aiden returned home. Aiden pulled out a board game, and they spent hours laughing, strategizing, and savoring the simple joy of each other's company. It was a reminder of what truly mattered: family, trust, and the bond they shared. That night, after tucking Aiden into bed, Nathan sat by the window with a journal in hand. Writing had become a new ritual, a way to process his thoughts and solidify his resolve. He wrote about the lessons he wanted to teach Aiden, about the importance of strength, integrity, and forgiveness, not for others but for himself. He closed the journal, his gaze drifting to the stars visible through the window. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Nathan wasn't afraid. He had faced betrayal and heartbreak, and he had come out stronger. He had chosen to let go of what he couldn't change and focus on what he could build. Nathan whispered to himself, the words carrying the weight of his determination. "This isn't the end, it's the beginning." With that, he turned off the light, ready to face the next day with the unwavering belief that he and Aiden would create a brighter future together. Have you ever found strength in moving forward after heartbreak? How did it change your life? Share your story below. Clara sat alone in the dimly lit living room of her parents' house, the muffled sound of their television playing from the next room. The space felt suffocating, too quiet, too still. It was a far cry from the lively home she once shared with Nathan and Aiden, a home now filled only with absence and regret. She stared at her phone, scrolling through photos from a life she had shattered, her thumb lingering over one of Aiden laughing with Nathan at the park. The emptiness was unbearable. Clara had always been the center of attention, the one with a picture-perfect family and the life others envied. Now she was the cautionary tale, the woman whose selfish choices left her isolated and unwelcome. Her friends had stopped calling, their once friendly texts now replaced with awkward silences and judgment. Her parents barely spoke to her, their disappointment hanging heavily in every glance. She reached for her wine glass, swirling the liquid absent-mindedly before taking a sip. The bitter taste mirrored the bitterness in her chest. "I didn't mean for it to end like this," she whispered to herself, the words hollow and unconvincing. Her mind replayed the last confrontation with Nathan. His words echoed like a haunting refrain. "You lost everything because of your choices." She had tried to dismiss them at the time, clinging to denial, but now they rang true. She had lost her husband, her son's trust, and the respect of everyone she once held dear. And for what? A fleeting thrill, a hollow escape from the monotony of life. Clara's phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. She picked it up with shaky hands, hopeful for a moment that it might be Nathan. Instead, it was Alex. The sight of his name made her stomach churn. She ignored the call, tossing the phone onto the couch. The very thought of him now disgusted her. He had promised excitement, passion, and freedom, but all he had brought was destruction. Alex hadn't reached out since Nathan exposed their affair, not with anything meaningful anyway. He had retreated, leaving Clara to deal with the fallout alone. Her gaze shifted to a photo on the mantel, Aiden's school portrait. His bright smile and sparkling eyes were a painful reminder of everything she had jeopardized. The thought of her son seeing her as the villain in his life cut deeper than any of Nathan's words. The tears came suddenly, hot and unstoppable. "What have I done?" she sobbed, her voice cracking as she buried her face in her hands. She had convinced herself that she deserved more, that she deserved to feel alive again, but the cost had been too high. In chasing a fantasy, she had destroyed the very real love and family she once had. Clara sat there for what felt like hours, the weight of her choices pressing down on her chest. She thought about reaching out to Aiden, but the fear of rejection stopped her. What could she even say that wouldn't sound hollow or self-serving? As the house grew quieter, the realization finally hit her. She was alone. Truly alone. And it was her own doing. Nathan stretched his arms as the early morning sunlight streamed through the window of his new home. It wasn't a mansion, but it was his. A cozy two-bedroom apartment filled with the quiet promise of new beginnings. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the soft hum of the radio playing in the background. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, but Nathan was determined to focus on the present and what lay ahead. This was his time to rebuild, to rediscover the pieces of himself that had been buried under years of sacrifice and betrayal. Aiden's laughter rang out from the living room, where he was building a fort out of pillows and blankets. Nathan peeked in, smiling at the sight of his son's creativity. "Need an extra wall?" he asked, holding up one of the larger cushions. "Yeah. This is the defense tower," Aiden said with a grin. Nathan chuckled, placing the cushion in its designated spot. These small moments with Aiden were his greatest motivation. They reminded him of the importance of building a stable, loving environment for his son, a place where they could thrive together. After breakfast, Nathan dropped Aiden off at school and drove to the local community center. A poster advertising a woodworking class had caught his eye a week ago, and he had decided to give it a shot. Nathan hadn't worked with his hands much since leaving the military, but the idea of creating something tangible felt like the right step forward. The workshop smelled of sawdust and varnish, and the steady sound of hammers and saws filled the air. The instructor greeted Nathan warmly and handed him the plans for a simple chair. As Nathan measured and cut the wood, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. Each precise movement, each cut and joint, was a reminder that he was capable of creating something strong and beautiful, even after destruction. By the time the class ended, Nathan had the beginnings of a chair and a sense of accomplishment that lifted his spirits. One of the other participants, a woman named Emma, struck up a conversation with him as they cleaned up. "First time?" she asked, gesturing to his project. "Yeah," Nathan replied, smiling. "Not as easy as it looks." She laughed. "It never is. But you're doing great. I can tell you've got patience, something a lot of people struggle with." Their conversation flowed naturally, and as they walked out together, Emma handed him a flyer for an upcoming art exhibit she was hosting. "If you're looking for more ways to keep busy, you should stop by," she said. Nathan hesitated for a moment but then nodded. "I'll think about it. Thanks." Later that evening, Nathan sat on the couch with a book in hand, the faint sound of Aiden's favorite cartoon playing in the background. He felt lighter than he had in months, the weight of the past finally loosening its grip. This wasn't just a new chapter for him, it was a whole new book. He was learning to embrace the possibilities ahead, whether that meant honing a new skill, exploring opportunities he had ignored for years, or even opening himself up to the idea of new relationships. As the day wound down, Nathan tucked Aiden into bed, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Good night, buddy. I love you," he said softly. "I love you too, Dad," Aiden replied, his voice sleepy but content. Nathan stepped out of the room, closing the door gently behind him. He stood in the quiet hallway for a moment, reflecting on how far they had come. The pain of Clara's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined him. He had chosen growth, resilience, and love, things Clara had forsaken. Walking back to the living room, Nathan poured himself a cup of tea and sat by the window, gazing out at the stars. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning." What new hobbies or opportunities have helped you move forward in life? Share your story below. Nathan sat on the small balcony of his apartment, a cool evening breeze brushing against his face as he gazed out at the city skyline. The distant hum of traffic blended with the quiet rustle of leaves, creating a peaceful backdrop for his thoughts. A steaming mug of tea rested in his hands, the warmth grounding him as he allowed himself to reflect on the whirlwind journey that had brought him to this moment. It had been months since the confrontation with Clara, months since he had walked away from the life they had built together. The memories still surfaced occasionally, some painful, some bittersweet, but they no longer held him captive. He had learned to let go, to accept what had happened without letting it define him. Nathan's mind drifted to the lessons he had uncovered in the wake of betrayal. He had learned that trust, once broken, could never be the same. But he had also learned that resilience wasn't just about enduring pain. It was about rebuilding brick by brick, even when the foundation seemed irreparable. There was strength in starting over. He had discovered that in the quiet moments with Aiden, in the focused precision of woodworking, and even in the tentative steps toward forging new relationships. Life wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. Nathan smiled as he thought of his son, asleep in the next room. Aiden had been his anchor through it all, the reason he kept pushing forward even when the weight of the past threatened to pull him under. Their bond had grown stronger with every passing day, a testament to the power of love and determination. Looking back, Nathan realized that Clara's betrayal, as painful as it had been, had given him the opportunity to rediscover himself. For years, he had been so focused on being a husband and a provider that he had lost sight of his own identity. Now he was reclaiming that. His thoughts shifted to the future. For the first time in a long while, the horizon didn't feel uncertain. It felt open, full of possibilities. He had plans not just for himself but for Aiden too. They would travel, explore, and create memories that were theirs alone. Nathan also intended to continue honing his skills in woodworking and perhaps even turn it into a small business. The idea of creating something tangible, something meaningful, gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He also thought about Emma, the woman he had met at the woodworking class. Her kindness and understanding had been a breath of fresh air, a reminder that life could still hold connections worth pursuing. He didn't know where things would lead, but for the first time he felt ready to embrace the unknown. Nathan leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had taught him to value the things that truly mattered: integrity, resilience, and the bonds that stood the test of time. He picked up his journal from the side table, flipping to a blank page. Writing had become a form of therapy for him, a way to process his thoughts and capture the lessons he wanted to pass on to Aiden one day. As he wrote, the words flowed effortlessly. Life will test you in ways you can't predict. It will knock you down and strip away the things you thought defined you. But the truth is, you're stronger than you know. You can rebuild even when it feels impossible. And when you do, you'll find a version of yourself you didn't realize existed. A version that's braver, wiser, and ready to face whatever comes next. Nathan set the pen down, feeling a sense of closure wash over him. He wasn't the same man who had been blindsided by betrayal, nor was he the man who had been consumed by anger and heartbreak. He was someone new, someone better. As he finished his tea and stood to head inside, Nathan took one last look at the stars. A quiet confidence settled over him, a conviction that this was just the beginning of a life he would build on his own terms. With a smile, he whispered to himself, "I'm ready." If you were inspired by this story, hit like, share it with friends, and subscribe for more powerful tales of justice and redemption.